Now here what I'm looking at is a butterfly bush. This particular butterfly bush was growing in my backyard. Let me back out so you can see the largeness of this butterfly bush. When this butterfly bush was in my backyard, it started to die. It turned into brown twigs. The cones weren't forming in the spring anymore, and the leaves weren't turning green. So I decided, because I didn't want it to go to waste, that I would try to reroot it in my old garden. And so here on this piece of land is where I used to have a big garden. And as you can see, this butterfly bush came back to life. I did nothing to it. I didn't start growth hormone. I literally just dug it up and plopped it down right here. Now that doesn't happen with all flowers and trees. There are some, like this plant over here. I believe this is part of the evergreen family. You can see the nice green stalks. But soon, maybe next spring, it will turn woody. Now over here is some things I have to go through and weed out, like this giant nut tree leaf. You can see it down in there. I don't know the technical term for that, but the leaves this year are huge. We've had a more unseasonably warm summer than usual. But then look at the wild grape. I try to cut that back every year because it takes over everything. And if you're not familiar with wild grape, it actually winds itself around trees. And then it's really hard to remove because it's got a death grip on the tree stumps and stalks. And you don't want that either, unless it's in a place where you can actually enjoy growing the grapes. Here's a sampling of the little baby grapes growing, if you can see that. And then down here, oh, here's another example of the wild grape. You can see the berries. Those are grapes. They're edible grapes. I've never grown them like I have this year to this size. That's pretty cool. Now, mind you, having said that, I tear these suckers down every single year. I come out here and I tear them down. But yet, every year, they come back. Now, they've latched on over here to a birch tree, and they're growing wildly all down the branches of the birch tree. Now, that kind of looks kind of pretty because it's overhanging the yard a little bit. Gives it a bit of a decorative look. I don't mind that. It's when they grow up, the branches and stalks and roots, and grapevines are opportunists. They grow anywhere, and they grow fast and furious. And as I just showed back there, they grow grapes at a miraculous speed. Like, here's some more grapes coming out. This one's loaded with them. Like I said, usually I come out here every year and I go through the garden and I take these down. Now here we have an apple tree, and this apple tree blossoms every year, but I haven't seen any blossoms this year. But next to it is wild sumac. Now, this isn't the poisonous sumac that you hear about that gives you blistering rashes. This tree here networks underground in these amazing root systems. I want to show you something in the garden. See that small patch of yellow flowers? Okay. So if you pan over into my yard, you'll see empty grass. 20 years ago when I moved here, I'm actually from here, but I moved back here when I built my house here. This area of grass was covered in black-eyed Susans. They were wild. They grew here on their own in the wild. And when I had the moving truck come, the next day I came out here and took a walk in my yard. And lo and behold, there was nothing but holes. Nothing but holes in my yard. Because someone dug them up. Now, I only planted the butterfly bush there and a couple of lilac bushes, which are the greenery that you see around the butterfly bush. Those are lilac bushes, and those will get buds and produce beautiful lilacs. And they smell really good. It's just like a tree, just a bush. Then over here, look at the black-eyed Susans. Another plane's on its way over, I hear it. Can't see that one through the trees. Look at the bumblebee, or is that a honeybee? I think that's I'm gonna say that's a honeybee. Oh, here's another one. And here's a bumblebee. Yeah, you can see the difference between a honeybee and a bumblebee. Now, I'm no arborist. I've just lived here my whole life. This was a family farm when I was a child growing up here. As you saw the flowers as we walked through the garden, and I pointed out the wild vines, and I pointed out the grapevines. What I wanted to share with you is something I learned a long time ago. My great-grandmother, who I spent time with as a little girl up until about the age of 4, and then I don't have memory of her, but she could have passed away about then. She actually grew flowers in her garden and sold them at the local store in town. That's how she made her living. She was a very crafty person, but you know, the flower portion of that's how she made her living. So I probably got my love of flowers from her and her gardens. I hear that they were magnificent gardens that she had. So when I saw that all these black-eyed Susans were dug up, my first thought was, well, at least they didn't just pull them out by the root and just ruin them. But then I realized, you know, these are wild flowers. And in my experience, wild flowers, it's not easy for them to bloom if you rip them out of the ground, dig them out of the ground, and replant them. You know what? I'm just going to go get more. And got some at the local store where they sell potted plants. It's not really a Home Depot type store. It's a specialty shop. So they have like a hardware store. They have a plant section. Almost like you could say possibly a mini Walmart, mini Home Depot, something like that. But that's what they're really known for. They're known as a nursery. They just added other things in there. They have crafts. They have Vera Bradley bags and things like that they sell in there. So I went up and they had some black-eyed Susans. And I thought, oh, great, I'll just replant them again. So I did. Susans had been cut down. Like literally just cut down. They were all laying in the yard, all scattered. Just everywhere. And I was like, what the heck? This time there were no holes in the yard. This time it was truly black-eyed Susan stalks laying around everywhere in the yard. And it just didn't make any sense. What? How did this even happen? I thought to myself, well, maybe a deer trampled them. Maybe a chipmunk tried to eat them. I didn't know. I had no idea. So I called my grandfather. And I asked him. He is the son of my great grandmother that I said I got my love for flowering from. And I asked him, I said, what in the world could have caused all this destruction and mayhem to my black-eyed Susans? I don't understand. And mind you, these plants are expensive, even more so today. We're talking 20 years ago. If you go to the store today to buy potted plants of any kind, especially the ones that, come back every year, not just the little annuals, you're going to pay through the nose for these plants. So even back then, they were expensive. And I asked him, what do you think happened to my black? And he said that he hired one of my cousins to weed whack them down. I was like, what do you mean you hired my cousin to weed whack them down? Why would you do such a thing? And he said, well, in my opinion, they're weeds. They don't belong here. And I didn't want them growing in your yard. So I hired somebody to mow them down and weed whack them down because you wouldn't. In disbelief, I was like, yeah, but I planted them. Why would I mow them down? That cost me like $40-50 back then. I don't even know. And, but it was a lot. And I couldn't believe that. Like, why would you do that? Really? Why? And he insisted. He didn't want them growing in my yard. Now, this is my yard. This was not his yard. So he had no right to come in my yard, do anything like that, hire anybody to... it's my grandfather. I'm not going to sue him over it. But it was devastating. Like, how could you do that? They're flowers. They're not hurting anybody. They're just flowers. I don't understand. Nope, he didn't want them there. He wanted everything cut down like a crew cut. My uncle started riding up and down the road here on his tractor. And so when I say he came riding on a tractor, he did. He came riding on a tractor. And I had a garden down there. I also had strawberries growing, heirloom strawberries that my daughter and I would pick. She was just a little girl at that time. And we had so much fun growing and picking those strawberries. We had so much fun growing and picking like the green beans, all of it. I grew a garden every year for my kids, and to teach them how to plant a seed and to watch them have fun picking everything until they got to a certain age. And then they were like, no, mama, we're not doing this anymore. It's too hard work. So but I did have strawberries. I did have vegetables, and at the time I had a little fence around the green beans and the lettuce and the other beans there and stuff, because the cucumbers, I have like little varmints, squirrels, chipmunks, woodchucks, and of course they'll get in and eat everything. They're very destructive little creatures. So I didn't want that to happen when I'm trying to grow a garden. So, but around those heirloom strawberries, for some reason, the animals didn't get into those. I don't know why, because they were sweet, delicious, ripe, red, juicy strawberries. So I just left them to grow, and they spread. So you'd have a patch of little white flowers and all the strawberries. It was really pretty. It was quite decorative. And that was right where that giant butterfly bush is today. That's where that garden was. And my uncle came over with that damn tractor. And he mowed everything down in his path. In my yard. Once again, my yard. Not his yard. My yard. And I went running out there because I could see him from my living room. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm trying to mow down the yard, trying to keep it, mowed. I said, I can handle my mowing just fine, first of all. Second of all, you just mowed down half of my strawberries and wildflowers, because I had those little patches of those lavender wildflowers. And he said, oh, what, those weeds? I'm like, what is wrong with you people? I'm like, is this a family mental disorder or something about weeds? I mean, You see a flower and it's automatically a weed in your opinion. It wasn't a dandelion, for goodness sakes. It was a little purple wildflower in a patch. Why would you do that? Like, I care for my own lawn. There's no reason you need to be coming up here mowing down my lawn. And, you know, I said to him, you don't stop it, I'm putting up a fence, and you're not going to like that. So what I did, I didn't have the money to put up a fence because I didn't know how to do that myself, and that can be very expensive. So I put rocks, like a rock border, like big rocks, not pebbles. That way, if he did come back in, he would hit the rock before he could mow down my strawberries and wildflowers and realize, oh, I better not mow there. So then I decided, well, since nobody can leave my front yard alone, I came back to my backyard, which was barren. Like, I had to start landscaping from scratch back here because of the building process. So when you go through a new construction process, there's no dirt, grass. I mean, it's all dirt and mud. All the grass was gone. So I had to start from scratch in the backyard because they had dumpsters back here. They had equipment back here. They had a blaster here to put in my well. So the whole yard was barren. So I called up one of my cousins who's a landscaper, and I said, hey, what would you charge to put in, you know, new grass? He was like, $5,000. I'm like, yeah, I don't need grass that bad. So I decided, I'm not doing that. I'll just plant another garden and then maybe plant some grass seed myself. So that's what I ended up doing. So there's a little tiny hill over here in my backyard that was completely barren. Nothing was growing there. So I started from scratch and I built up a big, beautiful mound, and I planted these 3 feet tall red Asiatic lilies. I don't have them to show you, but if you know what I'm talking about, those are absolutely gorgeous. What a statement piece those are. And around them, I planted other flowers, and I don't remember what I planted, to be honest, but I had gone to a nursery about a half an hour away, and they had all these amazing flowers I had never seen in my life. They were just absolutely gorgeous. And I spent like $200 on them. So I came back and I planted this. I built up my own mound and planted up my own flower garden. And I was so pleased with it. It was absolutely gorgeous. I put the mulch around it. And then I put a little rock, like river stones. I put them on the outskirts of the mulch to make like a little border. That way when I'm mowing back here, I would know, don't mow those down, you know, stop at the little rock beds. So I was in my kitchen, and my kitchen faces that side where I had that garden growing. And I'm doing dishes one day. This was like a day after I planted all of these plants. And I'm admiring their beauty. And I'm really enjoying the you know, I find plants totally peaceful. So to me, it was a nice calming thing to look at. Beautiful. It drew in some butterflies too as well. And I see my grandfather coming up on his tractor. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? Why is he coming over here into my backyard with a tractor? What is going on? And I'm standing at the sink doing my dishes, and I see that man mow down my entire flower bed. Now, to y'all that hate flowers, I don't. I absolutely love flowers. So some people might find this funny. They might find this absolutely hilarious. I don't. It was my time. It was my investment into these flowers. I was trying to beautify my yard, and have somebody come down here, and every time I was able to grow something, somebody would just mow it down. So the other day, I was outside mowing my front yard, and these black-eyed Susans were in full blossom. That big patch I showed you down below. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because I didn't plant those. Those grew there. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to come up here on YouTube and I'm going to make this into a story for everyone. Whether or not you like flowers, it doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, flowers can teach us. They teach us perseverance. They teach us about never giving up. They teach us about when one thing doesn't work out, try something different. The wild grapevines I showed you, they're opportunistic. They see an opening and they take it. They grow. They use other trees to grow up, to produce their fruits. You saw the different stages of grapes growing in the yard. You can see how the wild grapevine takes every opportunity to plant its fruit. Then you see the black-eyed Susans that were mowed down, dug up, and still came back to life somewhere else, but bigger and better than before. And if nothing else, I want the takeaway from this video to help somebody who may be thinking, you know, people are out there saying all this stuff, but at the end of the day, the flowers are still growing. The flowers are coming back stronger than ever. The flowers are unfading. I want you to remember those black-eyed Susans. And the next time you feel like you have no hope, the next time you feel like the world is not a friendly place, the next time you feel it's not safe or that you've given up, think of those black-eyed Susans. It took them 20 years to reroot and find a new home. 20 years. Think about that. What can plants teach us? I want you to all take care and be well. Until next time, thanks for watching.